Now, Professor Konstan, it's an honor for study at Transmedia, the Bulgarian Philosophy Club, and the Institute for Balkan Studies with Center on Traceology to meet a prominent scholar who has been digging in antiquity for most of his life, as far as I know.
That is true.
Yes. You've been long time working for Brown University, but recently you moved to New York University.
That's right.
Tell
6
us
years now.
6 years already?
Yes.
How did they pass? Can you brief us on the New York University a bit? Size, main fields of interest?
Yes, New York University is, like Brown, a private university.
I see.
But unlike Brown, it's very large, with many faculties. It's the largest private university in the United States. It has about 40,000 students.
Really?
And many different faculties, from theater and journalism to law and medicine and a great many others. It's got very strong programs in philosophy and in literature, but also in sociology and psychology and physics. So it's an all-around university.
And you still stick to the Department of Classics, which is your main stream.
At NYU, that's my department.
Yeah.
At Brown, I used to be scattered among a variety of departments, but at NYU, I'm primarily in classics.
Now that our audience is a bit more aware about your university and your personality, let's come to the topic.
Okay.
And the topic of today is beauty, a rather abstract issue. Some of our prominent men of science always claimed that Bulgarians were not that like the Greeks, near to the metaphysics, but still we appreciate beauty, don't we?
Well, I'm sure the Bulgarians do, because they have such a beautiful city. This is my first opportunity to see it. But the questions that attracted me in relation to ancient ideas about beauty were what you might call paradoxes or contradictions in modern ideas. Let me give you two examples,
Please do.
And then we can proceed. The first example is, we speak of a beautiful woman, and we kind of know what we mean, a sexually attractive woman.
Yeah.
And yet when we speak of a beautiful city or a beautiful mathematical proof, we seem to mean something different. So what's the connection? Even if we were to deal with human beings, we have images of great beauty, for example, religious icons, which we put in a different class from famous actresses or models who have a beauty that we understand to be attractive in another way. So my question was, what's the difference?
So you think these concepts change within the flow of time, from antiquity to modernity?
Yes. What I discovered was that the ancient Greek conception of beauty had more to do with erotic attraction than we might have imagined. And I'll explain in a moment how I discovered this and why it was a new discovery. This is the interesting question.
Please do,
But the second problem that I noticed was the following. We sometimes speak of a work of art as being beautiful. We think of Picasso. And we say, oh, it's a beautiful painting. But when we look at the figures that Picasso was drawing, if we saw one of those walking down the street, they would be horrified. They look monstrous. So, or we see a painting, let us say, of a battle scene with dead bodies, with things that look very repulsive in themselves. How can there be a beautiful painting when the subjects that are being represented are not beautiful?
That's a real paradox indeed.
That's a real paradox. But they're both paradoxes. One is, why do we think of beauty in this case of some women, let's say, as being erotically attractive, and other women not, and yet we say both are beautiful? How do we speak of a work of art which is beautiful as a work of art, but then the subject matter represented is not beautiful? And these are not just paradoxes of everyday language. Aestheticians, philosophers of aesthetics, raise these questions and take very different views, very opposing views. So here was a motivation, let us say, to look for how the ancient Greeks viewed it, since they were really in some ways the founders of the kind of aesthetic that we still appreciate today. We look at an ancient Greek statue of Aphrodite, we look at an ancient Greek statue of Apollo or of a young man, and we still see them as the ideal form. Now we look at an ancient Egyptian painting with those squared off gestures, or we look at a monumental statue from Babylon.
Impressive things,
They're
indeed.
impressive, but they don't look exactly realistic or naturalistic. Whereas the Greeks seem to have captured exactly what it is that we look
talking
at.
in terms of classical conceptions of beauty, which you even stressed, and idealistic, beauty is also referred to love and longing. To hedonist conceptions of beauty, for example, or even to uselessness of beauty. How would you refer to those paradoxes?
Well, the uselessness of beauty is a very interesting question. If one of the problems that people talk about when they speak of beauty is in what spirit do we look at a beautiful work? Let's say a work of art. We go into a museum where art was not originally intended for museums, but we are in a museum and we appreciate a painting on the wall. And we say it's very beautiful, and we become contemplative. We look at it from a certain distance. It produces a sensibility of tranquility. But is it really what was intended? Let us say we see a painting of a nude, and we begin to recognize that this nude woman is beautiful in an erotically attractive way. Or it could be a nude man. This is no real difference. Are we feeling two completely different things? Are we looking at the work of art in the wrong way when we feel erotically attracted to it? Are we looking at it in the right way? And we say, well, this was originally supposed to be an attractive statue and not sitting in an august museum where we all adopt a certain pose. So I think this question of the uselessness of beauty, well, it depends on the context. Museums are particularly useless places.
Talking in terms of standards of taste, for example, as David Hume suggested, do you think standards of taste are possible still, even if they change through ages, from antiquity to modernity? Could we talk of some standards of modern standards of taste and beauty, in a sense?
Well, here let's take two contrasting cases. One is fashion, which I find very interesting.
Indeed.
Fashion is changes, and yet people recognize the new fashions very quickly.
It's a big dictator as well, as they say, isn't it, fashion?
There is a dictatorship of fashion, but you have to be careful because the most clever designers can fail.
Indeed.
And all of a sudden, the next year, they produce something and it doesn't work at all. So they both dictate fashion, but they also have to be able to anticipate taste. So when we speak of taste in fashion, we have a pretty good idea of what we mean. Now let's take modern art. Really modern art, ultra-modern art. Very few people necessarily call it beautiful. They call it interesting. They call it impressive.
It's a bit of a neutral situation.
Or
well, I find that
even
interesting. I don't find that interesting.
Sometimes even...
Do they really have what to say? Because reading an abstract painting is absolute metaphysics, isn't it?
Well, it may be metaphysical. Sometimes you really wonder, is it mathematical? Occasionally modern art is done very precise cubes or very precise dots. Other times it's just broken pieces of work, and you feel that this is random and arbitrary. And so you ask yourself, now, are there standards here? what actually succeeds in making it into a modern art museum? What kind of works do? Are these standards, or is it just the market?
Let me quote David Hume for you, and I would like you to comment, because I think one of the formulas which he suggested, of course others as Santana and other prominent philosophers commented on this aesthetic, but I marked here David Hume's definition on beauty. This is the strong sense, he says, united to delicate sentiment, improved by practice, and then perfected by comparison, and cleared of all prejudice, which can alone entitle critics to this valuable character and the joint verdict of such standard of beauty. You did initially a master in mathematics, and I would like you to comment this, so to say, compact, but I suggest a very reflective and true definition of beauty, which we comment today.
Yeah. I think Hume's definition of beauty corresponds specifically to an 18th century development, which was the development of the philosophy of aesthetics. Aesthetics took as its object beauty. So there is beauty, and we have a science that studies it.
Yeah.
The word aesthetics was invented in this sense in the 18th century. It became the dominant conception of art. Art was nothing other than the representation of beauty. And to find beauty in art, you had to be able to recognize it and appreciate it.
Yeah.
But how? With the mind, with the eye, with the sentiments.
Yeah.
Hume and his contemporaries believed that there was a special faculty,
Yes.
an aesthetic faculty by which we recognized this new object.
In this sense, it was subjective or objective
Well,
beauty?
they conceived of it as objective.
As objective.
And this was a faculty that required training, to be sure, but any faculty requires training, even the ability to perceive quality in sports.
I see.
You can go to the ballet and you won't understand ballet until you know something about the steps. But they thought that the reaction to beauty required a very special kind of judgment. And Kant thought the same thing. There was a special kind of judgment, an aesthetic judgment.
Yeah.
Now, my own investigations of ancient conceptions of beauty were that beauty was very closely tied to desire.
I see.
Now, desire is not distant. Desire is not dispassionate. Desire is not, in the words of Kant, disinterested, lacking a personal sentiment. Kant went so far as to say, I can't even care whether the work exists or not, much less anything other personal interest in it. No, desire means you want something. The ancient Greek conception of beauty, I found, was that it stimulated desire. Now, the Greeks didn't stop there. They asked a further question. What about a human figure stimulates desire? And their answer was mathematical. It took the form of proportions. They wrote treatises that gave the most precise dimensions. How much this part of the finger should relate to the rest. How much the hand to the arm. How much the arm to the rest of the body. The head should be what percentage of the body as a whole. So they designed certain formulas, and then they observed those formulas in reproducing their art. But those were formulas that explained not just abstract beauty, but the kind of beauty that is attractive.
How do you make beauty then alive in the sense of a picture? It's a magic, isn't it?
To make a life beautiful, did you mean?
Yes, yes. Life beautiful and beautiful woman depicted in a way, put put in front of the attention of people. How do you manage this magic in a way through all these formula and formal arrangements and proportions and symmetries? Because a picture could be asymmetric and still beautiful.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, some of the ancient sculptures are deliberately asymmetric. They have a posture that they call contrapposto, where there's a dynamic
I see.
element to it. They aren't just rigid and formally symmetrical. So the science of rendering beauty is very precise, and at the same time, as you point out, the standards change. So in one epoch, very thin people look more beautiful. In another epoch, more fully fleshed out. Those details can change, but what we manage to do is create a certain association between one particular form and what is desirable.
I see, what is desirable. We come closer, we're closer to the end of our most interesting discussion, Professor Konstan. And the last question maybe would be, can we draw some criteria why and how societies, starting from antiquity up to our present, manage to shape our attitudes, our perception of beauty? What is this as instrumental?
This is a wonderful question, and I don't have a very good answer, but I would look to think about the modern economy and the stimulation of desire. That is to say, the modern economy depends on two contradictory elements. One of them is the urge to save, invest, and build. That is, the true leader of industry doesn't indulge his own pleasures, but always reinvests and builds. But he can only reinvest and build if he has a consumer.
Indeed.
And the consumer must want the product. So how do you stimulate the desire of the consumer? That is, in many ways, the deepest function of beauty in the modern world. It is an economic role, and it is constantly reinterpreted, constantly reinvented, but never discarded. And I think here we have a core indication of the close association between beauty and desire.
As it seems to me, there are so certain new paths, even though we live in such a complex and controversial age, in front of beauty. And let me wish you personally, and from the name of Transmedia, Studio Transmedia, we are broadcasting from the new studio of Studio Transmedia, to wish you all the best in your further work, and hope to see you anytime you wish on this table again.
And I look forward to returning. Thank you so much.
Thank you.